Black Lives Matter. So I've had a number of people, since I've launched the Crush Racism Challenge, I've had a number of people come to me to sort of just question, the whole Black Lives Matter ethos. And I'm not, I don't even know who the people are that lead the movement. I just know that Black Lives Matter, and people have kind of questioned that phrase. And so when I first launched the challenge, and I did some training on how to launch challenges, and one of the things they teach you is to go for the people that are on board with you. Don't bother trying to convince people who are not on board with you. So at the outset, my instinct was, if you get that Black Lives Matter and you're willing to do something about it, come on board. If not, this challenge is probably not for you. And that has been my attitude. But what I've found is some friends, and especially my white friends who haven't really been that familiar with the terminology, really have genuine questions. There are a couple of people who are just, you get to the point where you think, I'm not going to carry on this conversation anymore. But there are also a lot of people who genuinely are struggling to understand and want support, but are part of a structure where, racism is embedded in our society, right? So there are a lot of things that have infiltrated the education system and the way people live their lives that are inherently racist. And if you're part of that structure, you wouldn't necessarily know. So I've had lots of people asking me genuine questions and who've come on board once I was able to explain. So I'm breaking with that rule, and because I suspect I will have more questions coming in, and it's really busy trying to get everything ready for the actual challenge when we start in about a week's time. I thought I'd jump on here and do it so that I can address some of the questions. So there are about 5 myths that have been that people come up with when they ask me questions about Black Lives Matter. And so I thought I'd use the BLACK acronym to help me remember what I want to tell you, and maybe to help you remember if you need reminding about what it is. So the first one's B for Black. And the question people often ask is, well, why is it all about Black people? As a white person, I've had people be kind of prejudiced against me because of the color of my skin. Look at what happened with Asians during COVID. It's not just about Black people. And you're right, the racism exists in lots of different forms, and there's institutional racism, systemic racism, and everyday racism. The thing about Black Lives Matter is that recent events, I think, probably should have shown the world that the situation with Black people is urgent. There is no other race in the world that has had systemic abuse, entire systems designed to keep them under and to keep them dehumanized, to objectify their bodies, and to use them for profit. I'm talking about centuries work of the degradation, generations within the Black race. So when people say Black Lives Matter, they're not saying things don't happen with other races. And I'm sure the organizers of Black Lives Matter would invite you to create your own hashtag if you wanted to. But this is what we're dealing with because it's a huge issue. It's an urgent issue, and there are no apologies that are needed for saying the word Black. Okay, so L. What does the Lord require of you? So I've had someone suggest that I go back to the Lord and, just ask him if I'm doing the right thing on this. And for those of you who are Christian-minded, Micah 6:8 says, what does the Lord require of me is that I show justice, that I love mercy, and that I walk humbly before him. And there is no greater kind of issue in front of me now. And it's also about what you're called to, and I know that I am called to this. It is a great injustice. It's a little bit odd that I have to even say this because I think it's obvious, but it's not to everyone. We have a godly requirement to do something about racial injustice. So yeah, that's L. A is the one that we've all heard well, surely all lives matter. And that's partly connected to the first point, but there's also a different dynamic at play with the All Lives Matter hashtag. And it's something that I believe that was started by extremist groups because of the fear. What happens when you have people who are in power unjustly? There is a real fear that the people that they have exerted power over, and I'm talking about extremist groups, I'm talking about people who understand the racism that's endemic within society and that are in a position to change it and are doing nothing because it doesn't suit them to do so. There are, what we've seen with the protests, been a lot of people of all races who have come together to fight this injustice. So I'm not talking about everyday people, I'm talking about the extremist groups and the endemic stuff within the system. And there is a real fear that we can't afford for Black people to become equal because clearly they won't be satisfied with equality. They want to get their own back. There was a genuine fear, and that's why when we say Black Lives Matter, you have extremist groups saying, no, all lives matter. And it's an attempt to undermine that cry for equality. Black Lives Matter is not trying to divide us. The division already exists. It exists in our mental health systems, in our education systems. It exists in politics. It exists in criminal justice. It exists in every facet of society. And Black Lives Matter is simply raising awareness that division exists. And we are not going to hide our heads in the sand and pretend and put a plaster over the sore so it can fester more and more lives be needlessly and shamelessly lost. It's about saying this is an issue and we're not trying to go for superiority. We're just trying to go for equality. It's a cry for equality, and the history of Black people has shown such incredible grace and humanity in the face of incredible oppression. It's actually the oppressors that have shown violence and an incredible degradation of human life. And so the fear is unfounded, but it's based on history. And so the whole all lives matter thing, which I never thought I would have to explain. Black Lives Matter is not saying all lives don't matter. It's saying because all lives matter, why aren't we seeing that Black Lives Matter too? So I hope that's clear. I hope I don't have to explain it again. But if I do, you can ask me and I will try to find the time. Okay, C. I'm not really comfortable with this, I'm just not. It's just shaking up the status quo, rocking the boat. I see what you mean and I agree, but I don't feel too comfortable with it. So I'm going to share a verse that's going to sound very strong, and I want you to hear me out because it's not meant to be combative. But Proverbs 29:1 says, a people who repeatedly refuse correction shall suddenly be destroyed and unable to recover. Now hear me out. I am not saying that white people are going to be destroyed. I'm not advocating violence. I believe, like Martin Luther King Jr. and others have taught us, that non-violent protest is the most effective form of protest available to man. So I'm not talking about people rising up and killing each other. I think, if anything, the fear comes from within the extremist far-right groups. When people are so full of hatred and bitter, they will destroy themselves. So this fight for Black Lives Matter and other forms of injustice is not just to help Black people. It's to help all of us, because we are all at risk of destruction if we don't do something about it. So the thing is, none of us have the luxury of sitting out and waiting things out. None of us have the luxury of being comfortable, because if we don't move and if we don't do something, we will all become very uncomfortable very soon. Now is the time when we can do something about it. And the final one, K, taking the knee. I am just so happy that people like Colin Kaepernick took the knee long before long before it was popular. He lost his job, he lost the ability to ever get another job. And now, of course, the industry is apologizing and recognizing that it was a genuine, that it was a genuine complaint. It's an amazing thing, the knee. It's supposed to be an act of submission, and it's something that was used as an act of violence. And the wonderful thing about all this is the way everyone is coming together, including the police, to say we're going to turn this act of violence into something that stands for the fight against racial injustice. For me, that's a really hard thing, to take the one thing that was the great oppressive tool and turn it round to the thing that is a stand for justice. But throughout history, throughout our lives, it's the thing that God has always done. He's taken the cross, which is so offensive. The cross is such an offensive thing. The Bible says that the Jewish people believe that, to hang on a cross is means that you're accursed. And Jesus became that curse so that we could be set free. Oh, I forgot it's not a touch screen.